know Peyton is in the house, and she'll be answering some of your questions, interacting with you as well. So a lot of times as I'm doing this, I don't see all the questions coming in, but we love to hear from you. If you do have questions, feel free to fire away, and you can also reach out to us through social media, and we'll share more on that coming up in a little bit. So we're getting some guesses. Teresa saying D. All right, going with buoy data. Let's see who else we have in here. Shayla going with C. Janelle A. Corey going B, along with Tammy. Yeah, we were talking about proxy data yesterday as we measure climate change over centuries and really over millennia. I mean, it's really wild how you can use proxy data. The two ways, and there are two that we really rely on most recently to measure sea level and the sea level change, we rely heavily on the tidal gauges, and that's what we did for a long time. More recently, we've got some amazing satellites that are able to get very accurate and very fine measurements on sea level change. So they're able to do it from outer space, and we combine that data with our tidal gauges, and this supports this notion, yes, the sea is rising. So we'll take a look at that. All right, so at what rate does sea level continue to rise each year? We'll give you one more guess at this, and we're going to give you some answers. What do you think? Do you think it's about 1/6 of an inch each year, 1/8 of an inch each year, 1/16 of an inch, or 1/12 of an inch? And again, we're talking little amounts, but year after year after year after year, it starts to add up, and then all of a sudden, you start to have some really significant issues, okay? And we'll explain that. What do you think? Make your guesses here, and then we're going to reveal the answer on this trivia and jump into it. You guys have some more guesses coming in. Lots of folks going with A, 1/6 of an inch. It's a pretty reasonable guess. Yeah, Teresa going with B, Elizabeth feeling B. I think you guys are on to this one, okay? You were going with one of these two. The answer is B, 1/8 of an inch each year. This is on average the sea level global rise. So that's what we're looking at. Wanted to show you a picture, and this is live, and just to kind of show you, here's evidence of sea level rise right now, today, in this moment. This is a live sky view, and this is the Hague in Norfolk. Okay, the Hague is a body of water. It's a little kind of inlet that comes in off of the Elizabeth River, and in Norfolk, we've got this lip, this edge around the Hague. And we came through high tide, and with that high tide, the Hague was up out of its banks. Now today, the weather is fine. We're not looking at any major storms. There's no real reason for much flooding at high tide, except we've seen a little bit of an east-northeast wind. That's pushed a little bit of the water in. The tide's running a little bit above average. You can see them pushing in. And the issue that we had, it was enough to create some flooding. And it's not reaching houses. It's not spilling into properties or anything. But this shouldn't be the case. This wasn't the case not 30 years ago, 40 years ago, when this was all constructed a long time ago. This was never an issue, okay? Not unless we had a big storm come through. You can see this church over here near the Hague. This thing floods quite frequently when we get any kind of a stronger coastal low, or, you know, you combine that with an abnormally high tide and you get a strong northeast wind, they'll have issues. So this is one of the areas that now deals with this tidal flooding or coastal flooding, even with an east-northeast wind. Today the wind's 10 to 15 miles per hour. That's it. Can see the issues. This is a real thing for Norfolk. So we have these reasons for the sea level rise, and we love living at the coast. So many people live at the coast. This is an amazing place, Virginia Beach. Beautiful here. They've got a new beautiful boardwalk. They've replenished this big beach project over the last decade or so. It's just been amazing what they've been able to build up, and it's gorgeous. But we do have to watch, because folks living around the coast and along the coast, we are vulnerable to these sea level rises. So the reason for the sea level rise, well, there's that thermal expansion as the water temperatures get warmer, and they have. We've noted top levels of the water, top 700 meters of the ocean has gotten much warmer. And with that expansion, or with that warming, you get expansion. The actual water expands a little bit. So that's brought up the levels. We have increased ice melt. I'm going to show you some glacier pictures, what it used to be like, what it's like now, and you go, wow. So we're getting increased ice melt, glaciers and sheets of ice, Arctic ice. That's all contributing to it. And then some areas, like Hampton Roads, actually has sinking land on top of it. So you got the sea level coming up, you've got the land sinking a little bit, and because we've got those two things, we're actually one of the places that's experiencing a much higher rate of sea level rise than other parts of the world. We're really, really vulnerable, and that's going to impact our city planning and what we're going to do to try to stay out ahead of this moving forward. We want to stay here. This is a beautiful place to live, but we're definitely vulnerable to sea level rise. Take a look at this ice loss, and this is graphic, and I gotta again give credit to the NOAA and the Climate Center, climate.gov. They've done amazing things. The USGS, they've got all of this great information available. Because they're government agencies, we can access some of these graphics, but I want to let you know that these folks are doing a lot of great research, and it's amazing. If you just do a web search on climate change or sea level rise, you'll be directed to some of these sites. And really, again, our government does an amazing job of monitoring all of this. Okay, take a look at this ice loss from Greenland. Billions of tons per year. Okay, from 1992 to 2001, we averaged about 34 billion tons per year. Between 2012 and 2016, it was averaging about 247 billion tons of ice. So think about all this weight. It's incredible. You can't even wrap your mind around it. All of this, again, we're losing it because the Earth is warming right now. So we lose that glacial water, that ice goes somewhere. Well, it feeds into the ocean, and that takes the oceans, 2/3 of the Earth's surface covered with water, right? And it starts to bring the levels up. So this is a big contributor. We've got the thermal expansion, and we've got additional water going in. Really pretty amazing. Take a look at this. This is Peterson Glacier up in Alaska, okay? And this is way back in 1917. This picture here, you see ice all over the place. There's glacier. You've got, you know, when during the warmer season, it would break up into little baby glaciers kind of break up, and you had kind of an icy lake in this area. So you had this ice and glaciers. This is in Alaska back in 1917. Fast forward 2005. Well, the lake is basically dried up and it's become a grassy meadow. Glaciers have retreated and that stuff is gone. So this was back in 1917. This is in 2005. And you can see what a difference it makes. And again, this isn't like, hey, winter and summer. This is taking a look at the same basic vantage area, roughly the same time. That difference, huge difference. So the snow is going away. The glaciers are melting, and that is an issue. Now, you take a look at the contributors to sea level rise, and you see the amount that thermal expansion has done, okay, the amount of rise over the years that it's done. And then you take a look at how much additional water comes from the melt water coming off the glaciers. You combine the two, and you see where we are. This is the total. So this much due to thermal expansion. You add the amount from melted water from the glaciers and the ice sheets, and you get up to there quite a bit here. You're looking at the contributions here to sea level rise between 1993 and 2018. So those numbers going up, and again, it is something to see there. That comes from the climate.gov. That's NOAA's climate.gov. So I wanted to, again, mention them. All right, so sea level rise, we've got this going about 8 inches or so, 8 to 9 inches in the last century, all right? The rate of rise is increasing too. This is happening, it's measured, again, 8 to 9 inches and about 21 to 24 centimeters, if you're into the metric system, since 1880. This is going up, and the rate of rise is going up as quickly. It's pretty amazing here. As we take a look at the sea level trend in Norfolk, here you go. And you can see all the little variations up and down. Sometimes we have lower levels depending on what's going on with our storms and everything else. But you can see the general trend is that it is going up, and it continues to go up. This is in Norfolk through 2019, 2020, the latest data there. So again, we've got this definite mark that the sea is rising and we are vulnerable to it. All right. This is a look at the tide level from Sewell's Point. And again, this is how we kind of monitor the water levels. And I just showed you the live picture of the Hague. and you can see the levels coming in. This is this morning. All right, we're coming near high tide when I grab this image here, but we're not even getting up to really high levels. Those areas are just low level and susceptible to flooding. And this is just, again, basic wind-driven stuff. I wanted to show you this graph because basically every single day we get 2 high tides and 2 low tides. And we average the higher the tides. You can see there's a higher tide and a lower tide typically every single day, a higher high tide and a lower low tide. And we use those measurements and average them over a long period of time to give us a base level, okay? So when we take a look at that, you can see we just came through high tide. The thing that we're going to show you here is what our water levels have been like with some big events, okay, recently in Norfolk. And we base that, the water level above mean lower low water. It's abbreviated MLLW, mean lower low water. So that's the average of the lower low water levels. Okay, so you get your low tides, you take the lower of the 2 each day and you average those, and that gives you kind of your base mark. So that's why I just wanted to define that, because here's a look at some of our historic tides at Sewell's Point, which is for Norfolk, Virginia. So you take a look here, the highest that we've seen, the Potomac, the Chesapeake-Potomac hurricane in 1933, we had a level of 8.02 above the mean lower low waters. So the lowest of the low tides, we had 8.02 feet. All right, that was a huge event. A hurricane came up through the Chesapeake and up through the Potomac, so pretty much close to a direct hit, and you can see that really did a number on our tide levels. All right, then you take a look, we had the Ash Wednesday storm, another devastating storm, 7.22, but these other ones, Hurricane Irene, Norita, and Hurricane Isabel, all of these recently, you can see since 2000, and there have been many, many other things that have come up, not even hurricanes, but even just some coastal lows that have come by, nor'easters that have come by, and we're getting more and more of these higher water level incidents more recently. Again, it's another sign with these extreme events coming through more frequently, and with that sea level coming up even 8 inches, it makes a huge, huge difference as to the amount of flooding. You take a look at the flooding. This is the amount of flood incidents, okay? And you can see over the past, since 1928, it starts out here, you can see we had a few flood days per year. And back in 1933, when we had that hurricane, right, the Chesapeake-Potomac hurricane we just talked about, they had, looks like maybe 6 flood days that year, okay? And you see going back, not many, not many, not many, not many. Then you get up past 1990, and you start jumping up. Look at all of these cases now where we're getting more days where we're getting flooding in Norfolk. So what it's been like for the last 70 years or so, preceding the last 20 to 30 years right there. Big, big difference. A lot more days with flood water. Again, another sign that that water is coming up. So it is an issue around Hampton Roads, and it is something that we're really, really watching. Now, as far as the projections go, again, we used tidal gauge data for a long time to measure it. Now we're using satellite data. The models project, okay, that through 2100, okay, so we're getting out of the 20, you're getting into the 22nd century there. So over the next 80 years, the low estimation on models put it in around a foot or so of additional sea level rise. Some of the higher models are projecting 4 feet or even more than that. Okay, it's less likely we get up here that extreme, but it's certainly possible somewhere within that range, 1 to 4 feet of additional water over what we have right now. So if you think about it, if you're in an area right now around Hampton Roads where you've seen the flooding, imagine another 4 feet of water. And we're not talking about it spreading out. We're saying you come up and think about how far that goes. It spreads out so far. It would totally change the coastal areas and what our region would look like if we get that high. Something we're watching. All right. So that's a look at the projections. Now, how much of the U.S. population, I said there was a lot, okay? How much of the U.S. population lives in a coastal area? What do you think? Is it 25%, 60%, 40, or 55%? One of those, the right answer. What percentage of the U.S. population lives basically in a coastal area that really is vulnerable to the sea level changes? What do you think? Go ahead and get some guesses up on there. I know, Peyton, you've been answering. Peyton was doing a little bit of research, pulling some of this, and I was taking a look with NOAA's climate group, and they've got these numbers analyzed. All right, it's kind of interesting. Take a look here. 40%, okay, 40% of the U.S. population lives in coastal areas. Around the world, and I want to make sure I've got this right, 8 of 10 of the largest cities globally are in coastal areas. So this is not just a U.S. thing where we've got our major metropolitan areas. You think about New York. You think about Philadelphia, susceptible with the water coming up through the bay and along the coast. Think about Baltimore. You think about Miami. You think about New Orleans. You think about Houston. You think about some of these great towns that are right on the coast. Tampa Bay. These areas very susceptible to the climate change. So we're watching all that. Now here's a look at the vulnerability here with sea level rise, and you can see all the way down to the Texas-Mexican border right there, up Houston, lots of vulnerability. New Orleans, you come back across Mobile, Alabama, they're having to worry about this. Back over towards Tampa, I mentioned Miami, you come up through Orlando, well, not Orlando, Orlando's inland, but up through Jacksonville, and then along the Georgia and South Carolina coast, these areas extremely vulnerable. You come up around Carolina's Outer Banks. We know this area, and really the tidal plain there of North Carolina. Then Hampton Roads. We'll take a closer look at our area all the way up through, you can see Baltimore's area, back over towards Philly and New York, up through Boston. All of these areas paying close attention, and we need to with the sea level rise. Now here's a look at the vulnerability. We've got a little key over here. Areas shaded darker, higher vulnerability, moderate vulnerability in the lighter orange, and then low in the lighter colors. So you take a look here, you're going, okay, well, this area doesn't look too bad. No. Parts of Chesapeake, some parts of Virginia Beach are going to be fine, but there are many areas like around Back Bay, close to the resort area, around the inlets. You think about Lynn Haven Inlet, some areas there. Back over towards Little Creek and then Norfolk. Parts of the area, Norfolk and Virginia Beach, you get over towards the eastern branch of the Elizabeth River. Then you come down into Portsmouth and parts of Chesapeake, down around the southern branch and the western branch of the Elizabeth River. These areas much more vulnerable. You've got parts of Newport News and Hampton. All the way up, you take a look farther north up towards York and some of these different areas. There are some vulnerabilities. Middle Peninsula, Northern Neck, Eastern Shore, very vulnerable to the sea level changes. And even some of these areas back inland in North Carolina where these little creeks and different things that back up, this is very low land, and it is still susceptible to these surges with sea level rise. So we need to continue to watch all of that as things can change. It's a big issue, and it will continue to be a big issue. So that's going to be something that our politicians, our leaders, our area leaders, city planners, and the Army Corps of Engineers looking at how we can mitigate this stuff as the water levels come up. Again, if you have more questions about this and you want to reach out to Peyton, that's how you can find her on social media. I mentioned thermal expansion, and I talked about the additional water that is melted and has come in from like the loss of the sheet ice and glaciers. There's one other thing, the land is sinking, and I just want to make this quick point, and I'm going to jump back out a couple of maps here to show you this. Our area in particular here in Hampton Roads, a couple of things. There was a meteor strike at CHESAPEAKE. Now, it's really slowed down. It's really slowed down, but there's a theory, you know, the ground is still sinking from that meteor strike millions and millions of years ago. So crazy. Oh, there goes Siri again. All right, so there was that, but more importantly, we've got a plate that the northern part of the plate, you think about plate tectonics, right, and how the Earth is sitting on these different plates, okay? We're on the southern part of that plate right here, all right, and the northern part is up into Canada and up as you go farther north where we've traditionally had a lot of glacier and ice cover there. As that ice melts, we're losing weight on that end of the plate. Well, guess what? It's like a seesaw a little bit, all right? As that glacier loses the weight on this end, and Norfolk's down here around where my fingertips are. Instead of having that weight pushing down, that weight goes away and the teeter-totter starts to go back that way. So not only do we have all this other stuff that we're fighting, we've got an interesting situation where our rate of sea level rise is even greater because our area is sinking a little bit more. So plenty to think about again with all of that. Something I want you to really consider as you continue to get more information, more stories will come out. It's a big issue as far as the climate goes. All right, there's my social contacts. Guys, it's been so good to spend some time with you this morning. Hopefully you enjoy these. Tomorrow we're going to talk about the ozone layer, how it protects us, what it's been doing over the last 40 years or so, some interesting changes, some things that make you maybe scratch your head and then maybe feel a little bit better about it. So we'll talk ozone and the climate coming up tomorrow. Guys, have a great day. I want everybody to be safe out there. All right, we're going to get through this COVID-19. Take care.